Let's go ahead and get started with the Land Use Committee, this 21st day of February. We'll go ahead and do introductions. I'm Scott Diener, Council Member 3.
Jay Rosapepe, Council Member.
Rob Patonsu, Mayor.
Nick Bond, Community Development Director.
Jim Fisk, Principal Planner.
And it looks like Eric is still connecting to audio, but Eric Warden, Council Member, I'll do him a
Yeah, okay.
favor there. And Chris,
Chris Hammer, City Engineer. I'm hoping to be more of a fly on the wall today, but I thought I should follow some of the public works issues, utilities standards.
All right, I think we're ready to hit the first item, which is elect a chair. I've been chair a number of times, I think, for this committee. So I wouldn't mind handing off that responsibility.
I'll go ahead and take it if you want to nominate.
Sure, I'll nominate Jay. Eric, you're muted.
I don't think he's muted, but we're not hearing him.
Yeah. Eric, can you hear us?
Hmm.
No. But can you hear us? Can you give us a head nod if you can hear us? You can? Okay. That's something, but I'm sorry we're not hearing you.
So the Eric, under the mute button in the bottom left of the screen, there's a little caret there, and you might have to select a different microphone. It may be connecting to Bluetooth or who knows what, but it looks like he's doing phone audio.
You hear me, Jim?
There we go.
All right, I'm gonna get rid of this. Use my phone. Apologize, but Wi-Fi at home's not that great right now. So, okay. What are we working on? I apologize.
We're looking for a second for the nomination of Jay Rosapepe as chair.
I'll second that.
Okay. Well, I don't know. We probably need to do a quick vote, but I'm in favor of that.
I'll give a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Okay. Congratulations, Jay.
I got a hard act to follow, so you've
I
done a
know
good
about
job,
that.
Scott, last couple times. So the next item would be Givens Field. So do you want to take that one away, Jim, or?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So included in the packet is a copy of the original lease for Givens Field, which there have been 2 addendums to that, but the addendums don't actually contain the terms of the lease as it relates to modifications of the park. And so we wanted to make the city council aware that the Little League had started a project to modify Givens Field. And they had come to the land use committee probably 2 years ago to talk about doing a turf field. We suggested that we work together on a master plan for the park, and that we would happily support that, go after grants. But we have not heard from the Little League since then until they started doing some work out at Givens Park. And we recently learned that they have actually purchased turf and had planned to install that with volunteer labor. And so they hadn't applied for any permits to do that work. We notified them of the permit requirement, and then specifically under section, I believe it is 4G, I think, or maybe 4E, that city council approval is required for them to make any modifications to the park. And so they are now seeking approval from the city council, but we don't the permit application that they filed does not have enough detail for us to know specifically what they're asking for. And so we have given them feedback on their application saying we need to see a plan and a section drawing that show the proposed improvements that include, you know, what sort of material you would be putting under the turf field. And then we also would do a lease addendum to outline the terms of making this improvement so that there's indemnification. You know, if somebody gets hurt volunteer labor wise, that their insurance is covering that. There's a whole bunch of terms that we've outlined for the Little League. And since sending that information out on Friday, we have not heard back in terms of which direction they're planning to go. But we wanted the council to be aware, and the land use committee specifically is the committee that handles parks issues, to be aware of this pending request. And as soon as we have more information, we will bring it to you.
And Nick, quick question, have they stopped all work there? Because when I went by the field last week, they had pretty much ripped it up.
I've not been monitoring what work they've been doing, but they have been notified that they can't do work without permits. They were arguing that putting down like a geotextile fabric was erosion control, and we told them no, actually that's not erosion control. And so they are aware that they are not supposed to be doing work. Whether they're not doing work, I'm not sure.
No, I drive by there fairly frequently. The work was done months ago. They might have stockpiled some materials or something since then, but they've been complying with, and there was some confusion. Bob Showers has been my point of contact, and he reaches out to me, and he's the former president, and Nathan is the current. I think it's Nathan Martin. Is that correct, Eric? Is that his name?
Yes. Yes.
And I didn't have his contact, and when we were getting ready to do, gosh, a couple months ago, when we became aware that the field was all torn up, and there was a code enforcement action about to happen. I was asked, you know, what do we want to do about this? And I said, well, it's Little League. Let's be proactive here. Let's use a gentle touch. And that was perceived as not putting up a formal stop work order, which is wasn't my intent. So then I thought that the stop work, the site had been posted, and it hadn't. And I conveyed to Bob Showers that it had. And so Nathan didn't believe he had a stop work order. So they continued to do certain activities. And since then, Nathan and I have talked, and we're all on the same, I believe we're all on the same page now. But there was some confusion because I was, you know, my contact was the former president, and Nathan and I have each other's phone numbers now, and we're in a better place.
So this is more just an FYI then?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was when we wrote the agenda for this meeting, there was a chance that there was going to be a formal request for permission, but after reviewing the application that they submitted, we realized we don't have enough detail to actually bring this for approval, and so it was just an opportunity to discuss it with you. So it'll come back in April if we have something that can be reviewed, or if they revise their application sufficiently and the next land use committee is too far out, we'll just take it straight to council for approval.
No, in reading the contract, I asked Brandy to send me a copy. It's pretty straightforward about what the responsibilities are from my point of view. So hopefully we'll just, as you said, Mayor, be on the same page from now on and get the I's dotted and T's crossed.
Nick, I have a question.
Yeah.
You stated when you opened up with some kind of a waiver or something that needs to be signed, hold city harmless for the volunteer workers you stated. What's the difference between that or the volunteer workers that work? Is it because they're contractors, not Little League members?
We don't know who they are. And so it's clear that the lease includes hold harmless and indemnification language for maintenance of the field, but this is a capital project. And so the
For
lease
sure.
doesn't cover capital projects. And so we've drafted a lease addendum that would allow the capital project and would include all the terms that are needed for them to do that while ensuring that the city isn't taking on liability.
Yeah, so 4C, to me, 4C clearly states they're not to do any groundwork, anything without receiving prior approval. So I think you guys are doing everything correct, and then we'll just keep putting a thumb on them.
All right, sounds good. We'll keep the full city council up to date if something progresses before our next committee meeting.
Awesome. I forgot to ask at the beginning, are there any other agenda items that we're missing from anybody, Eric or Scott?
Not for me.
All right. Third item, public
Well,
work.
I did have a question. I'll
Oh,
lower my hand here.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
Oh, that's right. Have they hired an engineer?
They had an engineer write a stormwater report, but it was written to reference the county stormwater manual, not the city's manual. And so I don't know who the engineer is who wrote it. It may have been somebody just doing a kind of volunteer project, but didn't realize that this was city of Port Orchard versus county. And so so they have an engineer who did a stormwater report. They do not have a civil site plan or a section showing what the specification is for this field turf or this product. And so we don't know whether the manufacturer requires a certain subgrade based on this type of field. And so we're asking them to provide a civil plan showing specifically the section and the depth of all materials that would be installed.
Oh, okay. Well, my next comment, I don't really know how to address it, but there's been some pretty negative publicity over turf fields. I think largely some of that, well, I think largely it's due to the tire compounds that are used in some of the materials that kind of hide a little lower in the turf. I don't know if we have any idea about how to mitigate the effects of runoff from that field that carries some of those, carries the one tire chemical that is really bad for the environment
And human beings.
and people too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We don't even know if they're proposing tire compound because they haven't
Right.
given us that level of detail. So
Yeah.
we're waiting to find out what they're going to use to for attenuation of impacts. And our understanding, Dennis has done a lot of turf fields in his previous life as a parks district manager. And apparently the specifications for turf vary by age group and sport. And so there's a range of attenuation that you have to achieve for different sports. And so this needs to be designed for the users of the field.
Okay. Have they done a SEPA checklist?
No, but this is within our planned action area for downtown, and we did identify improvements at Givens Park as part of that EIS.
Okay.
I don't believe that a SEPA checklist is required for this project, but if we determine that this project, whatever they propose, is not covered by SEPA, then that would trigger a checklist as well. So right now, we don't have enough information to confirm for sure that it's exempt, but we think it would fall under the planned action.
Okay.
these are all good questions, and once we have a formal plan, I think those are valid concerns and ultimately you guys will have the final say on what improvements happen at the park because you have to approve them.
Just an FYI that was a very good topic you brought up, Scott. And I believe at the high school field, they're using coconut husk.
They are. You're
And
correct.
so that was one of the main drivers of that. So valid point. Anything else? We go next item.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Public Works Engineering Standards and Specifications update.
I'm going to have Jim tackle this one.
Yeah, we invited Public Works to speak to this, but wanted to bring to the council's attention several revisions, updates to the PWES related to roundabouts, utility locations, turning knuckles, providing some additional details, things like that. I think last this was updated 5 years ago. And so Public Works is looking to get this in front of council to have this approved. So in your packet, there's a summary of all the proposed changes and also a link to the current standards. There's not anything really significant here. Some cleanup work and providing some additional details. Is that right, Dennis?
Yes, as far as what I know. So I apologize. Is Ian not on?
No.
Okay. Chris, could you comment on this?
Yeah, like you, Dennis, I haven't really been, I mean, I know some of the history of some of these things, but I haven't, Ian Smith was the one that was heading up this effort to, so I don't know all the details and the recent work that's gone into it.
You know, a lot of this,
I can-
I'm sorry, a lot of these revisions come from us reviewing plan sets over the years and realizing that there needs to be some changes made to get the product that's really necessary. And oftentimes there's clarification that needs to be made because there's confusion between engineers and that sort of thing. So we kind of keep a running list and, you know, note this for future reference. And so it's finally here making those revisions.
And I apologize for Ian not being here, but Ian is our assistant city engineer and he's in his final week of employment at the city. So he's probably not highly motivated to be at a meeting after hours.
Just for the record, he had a loss in his family today.
Oh,
They're burying their cat. So
okay.
I will commit though that we will respond to any questions and inquiries on this packet.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to tune in so that I could just, you know, hear if there were any particular questions. But and to reiterate what Jim said, this is just kind of the stuff we've been like beating our head against a wall with, you know, things that mainly to clarify or make the requirements a little bit more have a little more teeth in them, so or a little clearer, so that we can you know, have better communication with our customers on those things.
When I went through the list, go ahead, Scott, you got your hand up.
Well, thank you. So the first is just a comment. I know that whenever we make changes to submittal requirements code, generally that means that there's an increased cost as a result. And I wanted just to make sure that we, whenever we look at changes to development code, that we are aware of barriers and that increased costs are part of the barriers that people face when they're looking at trying to purchase perhaps their first home, for example. So I just want to make sure that we are always kind of looking through that lens to make sure that we can reduce costs where possible. And then I've looked through this. I don't really see anything that jumps out at me as terribly controversial, but are there anything in here? Is there anything in here that might be controversial to the end user? I know that I think I heard earlier that you guys have looked through this, and this is just really the culmination of years of note taking and wanting to make changes. But I want to make sure that if there's any controversy, we're aware of it here before it goes on.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think I'm in a position where I can answer that question and be necessarily credible. But I think generally no, but there could be some things that you know are additional requirements on people.
I think when this comes before the full council, I think Dennis, and you need to be up to speed on the impacts of this because you're the one going to be presenting it to the city council.
Absolutely.
Will be proposed or to answer that question.
Yeah, I concur with Scott that the list itself looks pretty innocuous, but there might be an item in there that would be a major change, and that would be nice to know going forward. Eric?
Yeah, I read through it pretty well, and I don't see anything that would be controversial, but just like when you require BMPs, different BMPs, all those kind of things with development, everything costs money, you know. And when you make changes such as this, I don't see anything in here though that's gonna drastically change, be a huge impact. So
All right. Look forward to future discussion on it. Big one, next one, Nick.
All right, and I apologize, Jim. I was scrolling through the packet and thought the next item was comp plan, which was your item. So, way to take on the Public Works engineering standards.
So comprehensive plan. Who wants to take that between you and Jim?
It's Jim.
All right, Jim, go for it.
Okay, so as you all know, we're in the middle of updating our comprehensive plan to be ultimately adopted by council, hopefully by December 31st of this year. Last year, we did some public outreach, adopted a public participation program. We did some outreach at the farmers market, did some online survey type activities. We finished the existing conditions report based on past development and heard from the community, and that kind of is driving the revisions to the comprehensive plan. So this is a refresh on a lot of the elements. Capital facilities element is getting a lot of attention. But about 3 weeks ago, we received the first drafts of these elements. It included the introduction, the utilities element, and economic development. So we had a little back and forth with the consultant and ultimately got it in front of Planning Commission at the beginning of the month. And we explained to them that the process would be that we introduce it to the Planning Commission upon receipt and then route it to the appropriate council committees. So land use will likely see all of the elements. Economic development will see economic development. Transportation would see transportation, et cetera. And so we're trying to elicit comment from the Planning Commission, the public, and also the various committees. So we've included the draft in red line form with the updates. Now, the introduction's a little goofy because it's the first thing we received, but really we need to do all the work on the other elements because it will inform the introduction more appropriately. So we're going through the process of gathering comments. We'll provide those to our consultant. They create a matrix of all the comments and address them as they're appropriate. And then they will give us the final draft before, likely at the end of May, beginning of June. We anticipate having final drafts of all of these elements before June 15th, because that's when we need to deliver them to the Department of Commerce as part of the periodic update grant. That's our deliverable. And those materials must be submitted by the middle of June. So we're hopeful that you all have some time to make comments and you can provide them back to me. And I will make sure that the consultant, gets a hold of them and makes those changes where it's appropriate. Next week, we will be hosting a workshop in the council chambers on February 28th. It's a policy workshop. We're hopeful that we get a good showing. That hasn't been the case in the past, but there's always hope. So we'll take some of that input and that will inform policies and that sort of thing, where people have an opportunity to look at the policies and suggest different language, et cetera. But really, we're going to take all of this information from the various committees, Planning Commission, and then incorporate that into a final draft. So there's a lot in there. We spent quite a bit of time on the utilities element, economic development, and the introduction. They're not significantly changed at this point.
I just want to, Jim, as a reminder, have we reached out to the Planning Commission and Council to figure out if we need to do a quorum notice for this workshop?
I actually already did that in
Okay, great.
hopes that we'd get council and planning commission. So it has been noticed in the event there is a quorum.
So council members are encouraged to attend, though if you can't attend, this is a kind of a hybrid in person, and then there's an online opportunity to watch a presentation and then participate through our Social Pinpoint app. So you will be able to participate as a member of the public, either by coming to the meeting or in person. And generally speaking about the comprehensive plan, the big changes, we have new targets for planning for population and employment. So that's housing and jobs. Those targets are being updated throughout the document. And then Vision 2050, which is the regional plan put out by PSRC, as well as our countywide planning policies have been updated. And so we are combing through these plans to make sure that our plan is consistent with those documents, which is what the law requires. The big changes this go around are race, equity, inclusion. Those sorts of social justice issues are a major theme of Vision 2050. And so we are working to incorporate those into our plan. The other change is that the law now requires that we address climate change. And so we are going to be addressing climate as part of the overall plan. And so you'll see those themes woven throughout the document as we introduce these elements. And it also, the final note, if any of you would like a Word version of these where you can more easily provide your comments rather than having to review a PDF, Jim would be happy to send that to you. Just reach out to him and let him know, and he'll get you the Word documents where you can track changes or add comments using the feature in Word.
Got it?
So I'd like a Word version. So I've gone through much of it, not all of it, but one of the things that you might see with other comprehensive plans, and I'm not saying anything you don't already know, but that there's goals and policies, but then sometimes there's also strategies. And I noticed that we don't have any strategies shown. And I'm wondering if that would be a good exercise, not necessarily for this comp plan, because I know that we're on a pathway here and it gets to be pretty tight. But maybe we could look at developing strategies for some of the policies in the future. As an example, under goal 3, there's policy ED 15, and I'm on page, well, I don't have a page 6-10, top of page 6-10. It says, identify and eliminate disparities in access to economic opportunities by gathering and incorporating community feedback in future land use planning activities. And so my next question logically was, well, what would that look like? What would the menu for that policy look like? So I think it'd be worth talking about strategies where we can for future comp plan updates.
Great point. Thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off what Scott said about goals. Do you guys, on these comp plans, do you list what your goals would be? Example, under utilities with stormwater, you have water quality. And I'm just curious, like, what kind of water quality treatment do you guys have before we do reach Sinclair Inlet or creeks or streams? I'm just curious, what kind of testing do you guys do for your outfalls that show you the results? Is that something that you do in your comp plan that shows you within like 5 years you want to reach this, or 10 years, this is the goal?
So we just adopted in December the Stormwater Comprehensive Plan, which gets adopted by reference to the city general comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So there are a lot of outfalls in the city that do not have any treatment today. And I know
Right.
that there's a downtown basin plan that was part of the Stormwater Comprehensive Plan that is looking at adding that sort of thing to our system. And so the 10 capital projects that are in the new Stormwater Comprehensive Plan are aimed at addressing those types of issues. So and in terms of our stormwater compliance with our federal permit, our stormwater program manager left, and that position is currently open. But we do have testing equipment, and that is something that we do gather samples and look at turbidity and other issues when the need arises and as required.
Because of course, I mean, the goal is to stay in compliance with ecology and the state permit, but there's also goals to do much better than that too.
Yeah.
You know, than just meet the minimum. So I was just curious if those are goals that you guys list in your comp plan or not. I'm new to this game, so I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
If I may, Eric,
Please.
Scott or Nick spoke to as part of our stormwater comprehensive plan. And
Right.
the most recent one and the new fees and the capital
Mhm.
element to that was just passed here the end of last year. So
Yeah.
prior to that plan, the city council was only willing to fund minimal compliance and no capital program at all. So
Okay.
this plan that we've just adopted is a huge step forward and will provide funding so that we have the ability to try to move forward with capital programs. Now, it's also subject, these types of improvements are, you know, multi-million-dollar improvements when it
Oh,
comes
yeah.
to downtown basin. So it's logically a grant is going to be part of it, but at least we're going to have money for the match and to do modest capital improvements with the fees that capital facilities fees that were just approved here at the end of 2023.
Sounds good. And I do like that you guys chose the higher of the two, you know, the second level, you know, that was appropriate. I like following that.
So, Jim,
Go
can
ahead.
you give me permission to share the screen for the next item? And
Hey,
continue talking if you have more comments on this issue.
No,
Hey,
the
Nick,
only-
I saw Ian just joined us, and just to be respectful of his time, could you jump back to that item and then let him, maybe he can take back off and doesn't have to hang out and listen to the rest of this meeting?
That's very
There's a
kind of
question
you.
about the public works standards and
Okay.
who was it that asked that question and if they could be repeated?
That was Scott. Scott, can you repeat your question on the public works standards?
Sure. Is my mic on? My question was whether there was anything that was controversial or that might get some traction with perhaps the engineering community. Anything that we should have kind of a heads up that might be a touchy issue.
Yeah, I think the only item that could be controversial is the addition of requiring trash enclosures to be covered with a roof. Currently, the only time that the city requires that is if there are two-story type apartment buildings, so it shields kind of that view. So it's more of an aesthetic thing. From a public works standpoint, it's really preventing pollution from going into the storm system. However, the ecology takes the stance, I'm guessing by some lobbying from some certain waste management, that the lid on the dumpster satisfies the cover requirement. And as we've seen very much in the past, that there's been issues with just that cover, whether it's being left open or just kind of a systematic issue with that. So one of the additions is requiring those to be covered and then to be drained to sewer. And so we're not introducing stormwater to the sewer, and we're not introducing pollution to the storm system. Previously, we've seen people push back on that. So that's probably the only one that I would say is controversial.
I think that may go, Ian, hand in hand. There was a second part to that about if there were going to be any cost increase borne by people as we made changes to the standards. I think that's phrased right, isn't it, Scott?
Yeah, just that additional costs are barriers, or sometimes those costs are just simply passed on. But whenever we make changes to code, it usually impacts somebody's pocketbook, and typically that's the end user.
Yeah, and really the target user on this is like commercial type properties that have, you know, trash type items that would actually be an issue with pollution. Generally speaking, all the apartment complexes already have this requirement because of that kind of aesthetic side of things. And we've only seen the pushback really is from the commercial side, not wanting to do it. And there's not very many of projects that we see come through here that are the commercial at this point. But the ones that we have pushed back on it. And we haven't had any way to enforce it. And that's been kind of a sticking point with our stormwater side. And kind of having issues with that. So probably not a whole lot of impact on kind of single family residents, that side of things as far as costs. And overall from a project standpoint, not a huge cost. They're already required to do the enclosure around the outside. It's not a huge cost to increase with just the roof on top.
Thank you. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but literally what we're discussing is what I do for a living, and zero pushback that I've experienced since our code has been written, having enclosed. It's more than just the aesthetics of it, just so you know. Restaurants have fat oils and greases that they dump into the dumpster, bags rip open. If it's in a closed, confined area, and the basin that's below that dumpster, that does go into the sewer. It does keep it a lot cleaner. So I know it looks better for apartments, but for commercial, it's actually more beneficial for us than it is for apartments. So as far as health reasons and water quality. So that's all.
All right. Thank you, Ian. Appreciate you joining us.
Of course. Is there any other questions? Sorry, I was late.
So is Ian needed for any of the other items? And we let him go. Sorry to hear about your cat. That sucks.
Yeah, it was never something we want to deal with, but it is part of having a pet, unfortunately.
Dennis,
Right.
Chris, are you okay with Ian taking off?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for showing up, Ian.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Nick, I think
Yeah,
we're
Ian.
number 5, Kitsap County Comprehensive Plan.
Well,
Can be
1 second before we
Go ahead,
get
Jim.
to that. There was an addition on that comp plan, our comp plan
Okay.
item that was sent out yesterday, and that had to do with the parks list for the capital facilities element. So you're on mute, Nick.
Oh, here we are. Yeah.
Sorry, when I shared my screen, my mute button disappeared.
Oh.
So the city has started working on the capital facilities element, and we've been meeting with all of the departments and trying to work through our needs. But of course, we don't have a parks department, and so this is kind of a team effort between Public Works and DCD. And in the capital facilities element, we are talking about having we refer to our parks plan for the complete list of parks projects, but we want to put the near-term projects in the comp plan directly so that readers know where their tax dollars are going, where their impact fees are going in the near term. And so for the parks, for parks and in the list of projects that we intend to include in the capital facilities element, obviously the community event center and the waterfront plaza and the Orchard Street Plaza around the community event center are where a lot of our park impact fee money is going to be going in the near term. We also have a grant to do the Givens Sport Court remodel. That's the tennis and basketball court up at Givens Park. Then I reported recently to the council that the McCormick developer is making some improvements to the McCormick Village Park, as well as some multimodal pathway improvements that they're going to be completing in the McCormick West area that are eligible for park impact fee credits. And then the Sherman Avenue Stormwater Park, this is the big regional stormwater pond that we want to build at the end of Sherman near Blackjack Creek, and then to co-locate a park. It seems that these are likely the extent of what we're going to be able to accomplish in the near term, but I didn't want to have a list go public without giving the council an opportunity to weigh in on any other projects that you think ought to be on this list in the near term in terms of capital projects that we're telling the public we're going to complete.
And if I may, for Eric's benefit, because the other two of you are familiar with the Sherman Avenue Stormwater Park, you know, Eric, you've heard, can you hear me, Eric?
I can, yes.
Okay, just making sure. I was talking to
Thank you.
myself.
Nope.
You've heard a number of people talk about the condition of the road in Sydney South.
Sure.
And then, we had a contiguous short plat process many years ago that we put a stop to, that allowed development without, you know, storm infrastructure, sidewalks. And so the first step to solving that, because we've got to put in curb gutter, sidewalk, and stormwater infrastructure, is a place for that to discharge. And so I think it was in the last biennium, we bought 20 acres at the low point, at the end of Sherman, that will be, you know, the catchment basin for that entire community out there that doesn't have stormwater improvements, because we can't fix the road and build sidewalks without stormwater infrastructure, because we're just building dams with sidewalks. So it's going to be multi-year, multi-million dollars, but that was the first step. And in someday in the future, we're gonna do significant improvements out in the area. But we bought the piece of property that will be a stormwater facility and a small park surrounding it.
Have we applied for grants on that stormwater park?
We just, no, we don't have we don't just have the capacity at this point, or even match dollars, because the lack of funding in our stormwater program.
So
Okay.
we're doing an in-house design for the stormwater facilities and
Sure.
for the basic park amenities. And so I believe that's on the work plan for Public Works in 2025. And then we're going to try to hit the 2026 grant cycle with RCO to then, once we have a design and cost estimates and quantities for the types of amenities that we want to provide, then we can go after a grant. But right now we have a piece of property and no plan, and that doesn't typically score well in the Parks grant application process.
True. Well, number 4 on the list, when do you guys expect that sport court to be completed?
This summer.
Yeah, we're hoping to bid it this summer.
Okay.
It's a partnership with the Morning Rotary Club. They're fundraising. They've got about $50,000. They've committed to raising $100,000, and our match, I think, on the grant's like $150,000. But even if they fall short of their goal of $150,000 is better than nothing. The city will just have to come up with the rest of the match. It's a $350,000 project, Nick, roughly.
Yeah, approximately.
Nice.
Okay.
I kind of, I remember what I was going to ask. I think it might be helpful if Eric were to get, and I'd like to get a copy of it too, of the results of the parks survey that was done a couple years ago, which outlined what the community's #1 and #2 and so on picks were for parks improvements.
Please.
It'd be nice to send it to the whole council.
Yeah.
Is that the one that was part of the Parks plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that the Parks plan is online, and I believe all the appendices are on the
Okay.
city's website. So if you just search in the search bar on the city website for Parks plan, you'll find a link to the document and then appendices A through G. And I believe one of those appendices is the survey result for what people wanted to see in the community.
Okay, perfect. I know that there was a lot of improvement types, including brick and mortar, that people wanted. You know, Boys and Girls Club, a place for teens to go and recreate because the schools shut down their facilities after hours or in the summer, those kinds of things. And so in answer to your question about what other projects we might like, we might want to refer to that base document first.
Yeah,
And
it's Appendix F to the Parks plan, and I'm going to drop a link to this document in the. We don't have a chat here. Never mind.
And just to be realistic, we've largely committed the next 3 years, maybe hopefully not 5. It just depends on how fast development happens. So if Nick's right, it's a couple of years, but if development slowed down, it could take longer. we have the community center funded. We don't have the Orchard Street Plaza funded, and that's where we're rat holing all of those park impact fees until we get it fully funded. Because we don't want to take on another project till we fund the ones we've already committed to.
One question.
That's a good reminder. Thank you.
Go ahead, Eric. I got a question
Yeah.
after you.
All right, thanks. We recently went over the restructuring of our departments. Is that when we're going to basically create a parks department? Because
No.
I've heard a few times you don't have parks department. Are we assigning people to the parks department, or how does that work?
So I can speak to that. We have one employee who's our parks. And at the retreat, I'm gonna talk to you about whether that's a priority to fund an additional body and more summer hires. About 3 years ago, we did a survey and I thought it was time for us to, a parks division in the city, like other communities have, like Ballsboro and Brainbridge, is a ballot measure and a property tax, to fund park operations and a higher level of maintenance. And when we did that survey, there were 5 things, we asked the community to prioritize, and traffic and crime was 1 and 2. So that's when we went to the 1/10 measure and for Bethel, funding Bethel. And then we've been doubling down on hiring police officers. And unfortunately, a parks levy and funding a parks program came in number 5 on the survey. So we don't have a dedicated source, and it really, to have a robust parks and rec department within the city, it requires a property tax beyond what we have for current funding.
Discuss it in April.
Yep, it's on, I already tossed it on the list, whether you guys want to, I could even put a ballot measure, whether you guys want to go to a ballot measure, but at least my thought is whether that's a priority for you guys, adding additional staff resources but that comes out of our general fund, and it's the same fund that our police officers come from.
All right, well, that'll be a good discussion. I know that, there's a lot of interest. I think if I remember correctly, the park survey had pretty good response rate. And so it's definitely something that people are interested in seeing, some of their preferred alternatives, but I agree, there's also budget we have to think about.
There's a
So that'll be
there's funding component to it, no doubt.
That'll be a good conversation.
So my question was pretty simple compared to the rest of them. Where we put near-term parks project, because if I was just somebody looking at this list, do we want to put on anything from like 2024 to 2030? Do you try to put some type of timeline in there, or is it better to leave it open-ended? I mean, near term to me means much different than I'm sure it would mean to other people on this panel.
I think we're still having those discussions about what that looks like, but this is probably a 6-year look, and whether we call it near term or a 6-year plan, I don't know what the answer is yet.
Yeah, I mean, even if near term in parentheses meant 2024 to 2030 is just to give somebody some type of focus area on that, as opposed to some people looking and saying, oh, it's going to be done by 2026, and that's obviously not what we know with the community, etc. Just 2 cents worth, that's all. Anything else on this, on the comp plan update?
If I could go back to Eric. So I'm constantly, as these conversations happen, trying to add list them for the retreat. Was it your intent to talk about staffing for our parks within Public Works Department, or a more holistic discussion related to a Parks and Recs division and a levy?
No, it was to add a staff member for just literally a staff member. I think one staff member can do a lot. As a FTE. So that's it.
All right, I already have it on the list.
Perfect.
Well,
We're thinking alike there.
I will add that maybe it would be good to hear your thoughts on a Parks Department as well. I know that we're not quite ready, but at some point, we're gonna have to be, and I know we got a lot on our plate right now, but maybe
Yeah.
just an update to help the council
So-
understand where we are.
Remember recently we had a labor session and we talked about those further defining people and leads. That's the first step in that direction. So
Okay.
that is a direction we're headed, and having true leads in those departments that's their focus versus having everybody being somewhat generalists.
I know we're getting at a tipping point at our the size
Yeah.
of our city. So
Good questions though.
Yep. All right, let's try the next item again, the Kitsap
Mr.
County
Chair.
Comprehensive Plan.
Mr. Chair, I've got to recuse myself from the county comp plan discussion, so if you could maybe just punch that to the last, and then I will go off screen.
Fair enough. We
Good
can
idea.
move that. Okay. I asked this one to come up, a discussion on fireworks. The reason I asked this to come up is because it takes a year from when if we would put I'll use the word ban into effect. This year has already gone by, would not take effect during 2024. We had a survey done. Last year we had some more feedback. And it's something I was wondering whether we wanted more information to come through at our next meeting to move it up to council again, or we wanted to just table it again. My personal opinion after feedback from last year, I would certainly be asking if we had any drill down on the costs for cleaning up the city, because it was took a little bit to get it cleaned up, and I'll put it there. I also had some other folks who asked me when the city was going to enact a ban on selling and use of fireworks, and we're not talking about the display out in the sound. We're talking about local. That's it. That's kicking off the discussion.
All right. I've got my view if I can go ahead.
Go ahead, Scott.
So I recall that when this came up, there was testimony in front of the council. There was also, I believe, a survey that was done. But let's start with testimony. Testimony, by and large, was made by the industry. Both I think the gentleman in this case who sells a lot of fireworks. I can't remember the name of his company. But I think he reached out to every council member to advise them that, you know, there were alternatives. But then the other comments we got were largely from retailers who saw a funding stream going away, or what I would more accurately characterize as a funding stream where they'd have to go outside the city limits for their tents and so on. We did not get a lot of testimony from the average homeowner in favor of keeping fireworks. Instead, we got, I think it was 2-1 in the survey that we did against fireworks. And when we started to trend that out a little bit, we saw that it was fairly certain that people don't necessarily feel as good about fireworks as perhaps maybe they once did. The city council felt like and I'm going to kind of paraphrase here, it felt like that the survey didn't have enough responses, which I think I didn't agree with, but felt like it was not enough of a document to rely on helping make this decision about banning fireworks. There's also the safe and sane argument, which is that in certain jurisdictions, Oregon, some places in California, you're required to have no greater than what they call safe and sane. And so that's no aerials, essentially. All your fireworks stay on the ground or hover above the ground, the buzz bees or whatever. But the whole discussion just kind of withered on the vine and fell away. But I think it's important to bring back for a number of reasons. I think it's really important to understand what fireworks do to our marine environment. There's nothing we can do about the show over the water, but you know, that's where a lot of stuff ends up in the water. There's the stormwater component that Jay talked about. You go to the county parking lot after 4th of July and it's a hot mess. Well, a lot of that stuff eventually is just making its way into the stormwater system. The guy that I talked to that represented the industry said there was no concerns about toxics or anything like that as a result of doing fireworks. But when you go online and you read a little bit more about the smoke from fireworks, stuff is extremely nasty. And there's heavy metals. Heavy metals are burning in the air, what create the different colors. All of that stuff ends up on us or in the water or in our stormwater system. And then there's the whole safety feature of fireworks, especially fireworks today that I can launch. But when I was a kid, you had to be a trained professional to launch what we're seeing you can buy at the store today. And so I've seen near disastrous impacts where a mortar was kicked over and it came up the street and exploded in front of a little girl who was who's wheelchair bound. And we were really worried that she lost her eye, and she didn't in the end. But just those kinds of things that continue to happen. My street, like so many other streets, there's people that are very serious about their fireworks and they'll drop a couple thousand, no problem. But it's the same people that have contributed to a fire on the side of their house, knocking over mortars, basically just letting kids kind of run the show is part of the problem. So I think it's worth having this discussion again. I have a lot more to say, but I'll reserve it to if we decide to move forward on this.
Eric, before I ask for your comments, I want to point out 2 other items, if you don't mind, Scott. One of the things was we also had testimony that this would affect nonprofits that sell fireworks in the city. And you know, what would the nonprofits be able to do? The second feedback we had among council discussion was this would be non-enforceable. And we had a healthy discussion about, or could have a healthy discussion about the fact that some of our laws you put laws in for people to obey, they'll be obeyed. And it would really primarily be the fact that you wouldn't be able to sell fireworks within the city also, even though I think somebody did point out that would be a loss of sales tax to the city, which they didn't say how much that really was.
Jay, if I could just add his comment regarding unenforceable, it was really more if we go to the safe and sane model, those aren't the problem. It's the fireworks that are coming off the reservation. So if we don't do an outright ban, you know, I don't think there should be a middle ground, because then it isn't enforceable, because it's the problem. Fireworks aren't coming from the stand that's, you know, on the corner over here. It's coming ones that shouldn't be here, and it's just difficult to enforce if we allow some fireworks but not another type.
No, and I'm not disagreeing. I was just bringing that up. It's, you know, some of the discussions that we had. Eric, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, Nick, we discussed earlier today about we're kind of phasing out the purchase and sale within the city limits. Is that accurate? I mean, as far as what we discussed earlier today on the phone regarding where you can and cannot sell fireworks in the city limits.
So we had that discussion, Eric.
Oh, sorry, Jim. Yeah, sorry, Jim.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so what I pointed out was that fireworks sales are only permitted in commercial heavy and industrial flex.
Right.
Those are the only 2 districts. So what I said to you was my understanding of what happened after this discussion is that those temporary stands, they would kind of continue on as kind of non-conforming. But if they missed a year, we would no longer allow that temporary use.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of phasing them out, you know, as far as the selling of them. But
But to do a restriction, a ban, we have to do it a year in advance. So my question to the committee is this something you want to move forward with to get more information? Because if we took it to council, we'd need to do it before July 4th. so it would take impact on 2025. Obviously, my feeling is I'd like to continue this discussion. Scott, I believe you kind of a thumbs up too. So Eric, how would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I just it's really hard for me. I've never purchased fireworks in my life. I've never watched my children light them off. My wife and myself don't go anywhere 4th of July. We stay home because of our dog. It's really difficult.
Yeah.
I do not like them at all, but that's me. And I'm an environmental first person. If you haven't noticed my questions, I'm a huge environmental person. And what Scott says is 100% right. I'm just really torn with taking that away from people, even though, like I stated, I'm adamantly against them for my own family. If you want to take it in front of council, there's 7 people that can hold that discussion and put it to a vote. So I don't want to stop it from going to council. If it wants to go there, 7 people can do that.
Well, I'd like to bring it back next land use item so we can review the survey again, get some more feedback on what some of the other cities have around us have done. There's been quite a lot of movement on that in the past year, and then see where we want to go from here if we want to take it to council.
One more question then. I have a question for Mayor. How do we go about holding a discussion with council on everyone's feelings and their thoughts on this? How do you go about that without having a meeting?
This would be a work
Work
study
study.
topic, and I think you're spinning your
Okay.
wheels, bringing it back to this committee.
Okay.
I think tell staff what you want and
Mhm.
bring it to a work study. Al,
Okay, then what I would like to see is if you want to put it on a work study, but obviously a work study would have to be either,
but I think April would give us enough time.
fine. Okay, then I'd like to see the survey results again. I don't think we need a new survey.
Okay, so just bring the survey results.
Bring the survey.
forward.
I'd like to know what
Also-
other cities have done since we looked at this about a year and a half ago, because I know there's been some movement because I've listened to that, and come up with a recommendation. from
Also,
staff.
if we could get the minutes from the meetings where people testified, I think that'd be helpful
Yeah.
as well.
I wouldn't just get movement from other cities. I think you should be looking at, in the Puget Sound region,
Like
who's gonna
cities.
ban. That's, I think, more relevant than who's passed a ban in the last year or two.
Well,
Who has a ban?
I was just like, who else has done besides the one we've seen? Because there has been movement. We know that.
Yeah, but I don't
Sure.
remember who had bans. I know Gig Harbor does. Beyond that, and
Bainbridge Island,
I believe.
Bainbridge Island is a complete ban. I also know that the county has been talking about with the new commissioners about this, the ban as well. And what's really driving that is the propensity for fires now, which, I think we all need to remember that too.
What's crazy is the HOA, I believe, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, bans them in McCormick. So the
We do.
situation you guys experience in McCormick Woods is vastly different than what we're experiencing downtown. And in particular, when COVID caused our public display not to be on 4th of July, we had a safe and family-friendly event. When the public display happens on 4th of July, everybody brings their fireworks to downtown Port Orchard and is lighting them off in crowds on people's, you park in front of somebody's house and you start lighting fireworks. You don't even live here and you're lighting off fireworks in front of somebody's house in the middle of the street. It just turns our downtown into a war zone.
Well, and then walk the shoreline after a 4th of July event, and it's just it's a hot mess of cardboard, wood, plastics, all kinds of debris from fireworks.
Just from a
Last year-
public safety standpoint, if we're not comfortable with doing an outright ban, to ban them on the waterfront during, anywhere that you're viewing the public display, because we've got 5,000 or more people congregated, it's a public safety problem to have these mortars going off in a crowd. It's just nuts.
You can't drive down Beach Drive. They're literally fireworks are being lit off in the middle of Beach Drive.
Yeah, that's
It's-
county. Yeah.
That's exactly what's going all over downtown, anywhere you can
Right.
see that public display.
And we see that over at the Ridge too.
Yeah.
So let's move on. We've been moving on pretty well today. We got the other item to talk about yet with the county. We're going to move that one down, but impact fees related to ADU.
So I added this, but this was at the request of Fred, who had conversations with the city about impact fees, and apparently there was, I don't know if it was completely dialed in, but Fred was made aware he's going to pay, and sorry, let me back that up. And maybe Nick, you should be telling a story, but Fred is paying his
He
impact
is
fee.
paying-
but
He
he
doesn't
wanted-
like that he had to pay an impact fee for his ADU. That's
Yeah, and so I think he latched onto the idea and wanted us to talk about whether we should be waiving certain fees for ADUs to promote their development. And that's on the one hand, that's okay. That's not a bad idea. On the other hand, do we need to incentivize them?
Scott, I
Especially
really
with
think
our
this-
population blowing
Yeah.
up like we've seen.
Yeah, I think this would be really poor policy. McCormick is about to build a whole bunch of these, and they don't need an incentive for these to happen. These folks, it's another dwelling. They're going to have one, if not two more cars that are impacting our streets, and they need to pay their fair share. And they don't pay a full impact fee. Nick, it's a reduced
Well,
amount, isn't it?
So I think this discussion is both about capital facility charges and impact fees. And
Yes.
yes, for impact fees for parks and for schools and for the transportation, there is a reduced rate for ADUs. But for water, sewer, and stormwater, currently the way that we treat ADUs is that if you're connected to the same meter as the main house, you're covered by that connection. So that goes for water and sewer. Stormwater, our new ordinance setting the CFC for stormwater was not clear on how to handle ADUs. And so we're working to potentially clarify that. But I think one of the problems is if we want to charge water and sewer fees on the ADUs, we don't reduce the fees, even though the units are significantly smaller. There's every unit of housing in the city is one ERU, regardless of whether it's 400 square feet or whether it's a 10,000 square foot mansion. And so that's where I think we have a little bit more latitude to soften the blow for ADUs so that they're still paying their fair share, but they're not being discouraged, which is, I think, where we could be if we didn't have the policy that we have today, but what McCormick is doing is really making us question whether we need an ADU rate for water and sewer fees.
All right,
I don't
Eric?
think we need to incent them because they're happening.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the McCormick ADUs are different than the one-off backyard ADU. The ADU that Fred Chang built is the first detached ADU we've had built in the city in years. And what McCormick is doing is they're doing 400 units of housing, and it's all going to be rentals. And there are ADUs within that rental mix, but the whole site is being managed like an apartment complex where people will rent a unit above a garage, or they'll rent a detached house, or they'll rent a unit in a fourplex. But it's not quite this. I mean, it is a different housing type, and so it's satisfying the demand for middle housing, but it's not the infill development we're trying to encourage downtown necessarily. So I think they're a little bit apples to oranges, what McCormick's proposed versus what we're talking about in backyards behind existing homes in the city.
So you're taking a look then to see where we can soften the blow on this.
We
Not
weren't taking a look at it. Fred asked.
We are not taking a look at it. Okay.
Yeah.
I have. Yep.
I-
Eric, do you have any questions on it?
No. I guess I do. Nick, do you think that most of those ADUs are going to be rentals in McCormick, or you think a lot of them are going to be like their kids living with them? I guess kind of the same thing, but a mother-in-law cottage or something like that. What's your feeling on that?
My understanding is they will be rented separately, but if somebody wanted a multi-generational household, they could
True.
choose to rent both units, but it really is, every unit is available separately, and what somebody chooses to lease is up to them.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so we hadn't been looking at this. Fred asked it to be brought to this committee. If it's the direction of the committee and then the full count, you want it to take it to a work study, it could become part of a work plan and we could look at that. But it is not currently in anybody's work plan.
I'm comfortable where we're at right now. I think, we look at it from my perspective as a supply and demand issue, and right now it's not an issue. Scott?
I'm good with that. I think just need to reach out to Fred and talk Fred off the ledge a little bit.
Well, and I would say that I think the direction that may be helpful from council, if we wanted to work this into our future utility system planning, is our utility system plans really ought to look at housing type rather than one ERU regardless of water usage. And if that's a policy that the city council wants to direct staff to do as we update these plans, that's probably worth looking at, because right now it doesn't matter what size unit or how much water you use, you still pay one ERU. And the legislature for impact fees now requires that we look at the impact of a unit when calculating how much they pay, but that statute doesn't apply to capital facility charges. But I think it's the intent of the legislature to try to encourage these things, and we should probably make sure that we are encouraging these in other areas by being fair, not by subsidizing, but just by being fair.
So
Sounds
I would agree that I think maybe that equity look would be useful for the next plan update.
So I think we're saying move it over to utilities.
Well, it would be part of our recommendation that is, it sounds like your recommendation is to punt this to utilities.
Utilities.
And the recommendation would then be to make it part of a future water system plan update, which we just did a year ago.
Right.
It's probably 5 years or more out.
Yep. You good with that, Eric,
Well,
since we'll see each other in utilities?
We don't have to wait.
I'm good with it.
No,
We don't have
To
to
be
wait
realistic,
5 years.
Scott, it costs a whole bunch of money to have a consultant do it, and somebody's got to manage the project.
Yeah.
And we're barely keeping our nose above water.
Well,
Yeah,
well,
I mean, 5 years seems like a long time. I would say, what about 3 years?
Well,
Why
let me
don't-
just
why don't
throw
we-
this out there. The consultant does these CFC studies and they come up with a proposed rate. And that is the maximum that the city council can charge. I believe that the city council could lower the fees for certain building types if it's justified, but it's better if you do a rate study, because then it's defensible, and also you're ensuring that you're fully funding all of the improvements you're trying to build. Right now, if you were to lower the fee for ADUs without raising the fee for single family homes, you're creating a gap in funding. And I think that's what we want to avoid. But there is nothing that says that the city council couldn't choose to set an ADU rate that is lower than the main unit rate without doing the study.
Let's kick it down to, not kick it, let's pass it to utilities and then we'll come back from there.
Okay.
Take
Good.
it off the land use. Everybody good with that?
Yes.
All right. So Dennis, that's
You
not.
get to hear it again, Eric.
All right, cool. All right, before we let Scott go, meeting time and date. That Jim had kind of kicked that around when we were talking. Does this work for everybody? We were going to third Wednesday, I believe, at 4:30, correct, Jim?
For this committee, I didn't think that it was a discussion that it would still be
Okay.
the third Wednesday
have
at
missed-
4:30.
I may have missed that with the utilities committee. So where we're at then, everybody's good with this time frame?
Yeah.
Okay, all works. Scott, have a nice evening.
I just wanted to say that Eric Baker is managing the county comprehensive plan. He's done every comp plan for the county since 2006 update, except for one. But a lot of my staff are working with Eric on the comp plan, and it's possible that I could be involved in the comp plan, especially if there's an EIS issue or appeal. But I felt it would be better if I recuse myself from this like I have for past county issues. Any concerns about that from anybody?
Nope.
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
You
Good
too.
night.
Scott.
Bye.
All right, so I'll start out by reminding everyone I sent a draft comment letter to the full city council about a week ago, and unfortunately, this comment letter is due before our next council meeting, so we don't have a chance to discuss it with everybody. But I did want to take it to this committee, have a little bit of discussion, and then I'm hoping that if any other council members have concerns, they will let me know. But the county has asked us to comment by the 26th of February on their proposed comprehensive plan alternatives and the proposed land use amendments. I'm going to share my screen here. There are really only a handful of amendments in and around Port Orchard, and I should say around Port Orchard because none of them are within the city limits, but they do affect our urban growth area. And so I've written a comment letter that it supports, there's a little yellow box here at the end, just above McCormick Village, and it's really contiguous to both McCormick Village and Sinclair Ridge in Bremerton. It is bounded on the diagonal by a creek, and so there's just a small area of developable land that is urban on both sides. The site was logged years ago, so there's no trees, it's totally bare, and it seems like a logical add to the urban growth area that probably is going to yield 20 to 40 homes. And ultimately, they're served by Bremerton Water and Sewer if they come into the urban growth area. But I have no objection to this being added, and hopefully everyone else would agree. The next amendment down here at the bottom of Sydney Road, this is behind the Safeway, what used to be Albertsons at Sydney and Sedgwick. This blue aqua color. The county has proposed to expand our urban growth area and to designate this land as industrial. I don't object to the urban growth area expansion. I do have concern that the industrial is really a way for the landowners to try to permit storage units, and I don't know that that's necessarily what we want in that area. The comment letter that I drafted suggests that yes, we support the expansion, but we'd prefer to see this residential and not to have a bunch more storage units added to the city. And so I wanted to open that for discussion and see if anyone has any thoughts.
What about a commercial or mixed use designation, Nick?
That would be
I
okay
agree with
too.
you that industrial doesn't fit with all the apartments and retail that's in that area.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think we've been pretty clear as a council that we're trying to get away from the amount of storage that we already had, any new storage in the city.
I agree 100%.
All right, well, that's what the letter says right now, so I will leave it as is, and I'm going to hit send on this letter on Friday afternoon if I haven't heard back from people. The next amendment on Bethel Road South, just outside of the city, there's a whole bunch of residential land that the county is proposing to change to commercial. The reason for that is that the county has too much residential land and not enough commercial land for jobs. And so this is an area where they felt like it would be logical to move to commercial designations going forward. This is something that we've sought to annex for quite a while. This is consistent with what's in our plan. And so I would recommend supporting these commercial changes.
I agree.
No issue.
All right. The next change out here off of Phillips, I believe it's Phillips, a little east of Phillips Road, this green area, this is currently all in our urban growth area, meaning that it can be developed as urban. The parcels that are here, there's some slopes, there's some other development constraints, and it doesn't really make sense for this area to be urban. And because the county has too much residential land, they're proposing to subtract this area from the urban growth boundary. I don't think the city would ever be interested in annexing what's here. And if it developed, it's going to be such a patchwork of kind of uncoordinated development. I don't think it's something that we want to annex in the future, even if it's in our urban growth area. So I don't think we should have an objection. I see Eric nodding in agreement, I think.
I agree with you. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think providing sewer out to urban level services is cost prohibitive.
Yeah, there's no Mile Hill's not happening, or Cedric Road, yeah.
The final amendment, there's a handful of commercial properties that are currently residential that most of these have non-conforming uses. I think the Hanley Construction has a yard out here that is non-conforming, and so they've had some code enforcement issues. This would fix kind of these non-conforming issues and also reduce the residential supply of land, which helps the county. And so again, I don't have an objection to that proposed change. And before I move on to the other topics in the draft letter I've written, I just noticed this. This was not highlighted for me, but there is a proposed rural commercial addition down here at Monex. I had not seen this previously, and a few years ago they zoned so that gas station could go in.
Right.
I'm tempted to comment that we do not support this. Number one, there's a stream that goes through that property, but I think this probably hurts Port Orchard's commercial areas because it's going to end up as a gas station or a convenience store or something that we'd probably prefer to see in the city. But I'll leave it to you to suggest whether we ought to include this. And if we do want to include it, I want to let the rest of the council know that whether we oppose or support this.
Could you go through that again, Nick? I'm sorry. I'm watching it and I'm going, okay.
So let me, I'm going to share. So this is the area. I'll turn on the aerial photograph just so you get your bearings a little bit. So this is the overpass at Mullinex. There's a new gas station that was just built here at the southwest corner.
Yeah, I'm real aware of that one.
Okay, so this property owned by Campbell, Stokes, and Stokes, all of these are proposed to go from a rural residential to a rural commercial. And
Okay,
so
got it.
the rural commercial allows for things like gas stations and convenience stores. And it seems like those are, if we're trying to not encourage sprawl, we really want those things to occur in the urban area. And I just see this gas station creeping to become another gas station, which, competes with our gas stations. And it seems like you can see there's a stream here that goes across this property that's probably got a 150-foot buffer. So there's not a whole lot of this area left. You could probably still squeeze in another gas station, but is that something we want to see as a city, or does that?
And Stokes was the developer of the gas station that happened
Yeah.
there.
Right.
I mean, I'm actually okay with that gas station because the distance to Cedric, but I don't want to see more convenience stores and things like that in that area.
I would concur with that.
All right, I'm going to add a draft comment to my letter, and I will email the full city council to say that we discussed this at land use and we decided that there's an additional amendment. Here's what it is. We'd like to object to this as well for creating commercial land in an area with critical areas and just stating our opposition. So finally, the other two issues in my comment letter that are not map issues, but one of them is a map issue. South Kitsap Fire and Rescue has bought a piece of property just outside of the city, next to the future high school site in the McCormick area.
Right.
It's completely rural. They would like to have it changed to urban so that they can annex and then come build a fire station in the city rather than going through the county for permitting. And so I am mentioning that we would like to see that parcel made urban because it has recently been acquired. And then I made some comments about the county.
And Nick, if I may, and that's the fire department came to us and asked us for that to bring that into the city.
Why is that? What's the
Permitting,
benefit?
they want to work with us and our permitting versus the county's permitting process.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other issues really deal with transportation, and there's two separate issues. The county, the state legislature authorized cities and counties to raise their thresholds for environmental review. Currently, the law states that developments of more than 4 lots or 4 units of housing would have to go through SEPA review. The thresholds for review have been increased, and the county is proposing to make it so that fewer developments go through environmental review at the time of permitting. And while I support streamlining permitting processes, the county doesn't have a way for us to mitigate impacts of county projects on city facilities. And so when we talk about like Bethel Road South, we've written comment letters to the county in recent years about proposed residential development. I think there was one on this property here just south of Fred Meyer in the county, but it was going to send significant traffic to city intersections. And we commented and told the county, you need to mitigate these impacts. And if they raise the SEPA thresholds, this type of project would not have been gone through review such that we could extract the same type of mitigation for the city. And so for that reason, I'm objecting to the county changing that unless they enter into an agreement with the city that says they're going to what I would love to see in a dream world would be they agree to pay a small portion of our impact fee for development in the urban growth area so that that development is paying to help fix Bethel, because we have $100 million in projects there and not enough funding. So I'm suggesting that they hold off on that proposal unless they're willing to enter into agreement for transportation mitigation.
Sounds good. Yeah.
All right. Finally, the county, cities and counties are required to have what's called a concurrency ordinance, where they review transportation facilities specifically to verify that there is capacity in the road network for proposed development. And the county oddly only looks at the segments between intersections for throughput. They don't look at the actual intersections as to whether they do or do not fail. And so what we're commenting on is we're saying, look, you need to look at intersections, segments, and non-motorized issues to mitigate development, to make sure that you're putting in sidewalks where sidewalks are needed, that if turn lanes are needed at an intersection, that they're getting added. And right now the county just doesn't have those standards. And so this was, we commented 8 years ago on this. We actually appealed the county's comprehensive plan over this, and they made some changes, but they still haven't adopted intersection or non-motorized level of service standards. So I think we should continue to ask for that.
Absolutely.
And so that is my comment letter. Any concerns with that overall?
No, I don't have any concerns, but I have a question, and this is more of a tangent. This is going to be a little bit new to you, possibly, Eric.
Your tangent? No.
No, hang on a minute. So the question came up, several years ago. They brought to the council about annexation. They haven't. None of that is in their comp plan, or have they come back any more about annexation of various properties?
There's a new methodology that allows for a ILA annexation, and
Right.
I'm not gonna throw a single county commissioner who might represent our district under the bus, but we were interested in doing some targeted ILA Bethel South and some pockets that are surrounded by the city. And the process that county commissioner wanted was too onerous, and then the county and the city started their comprehensive planning processes, and we needed to get those done and not be distracted by this process. So I believe that will get dusted back off in 2025. There's a desire, not just in South Kitsap, but in Central Kitsap and other places. We're required by law to take on the RUGA, but we can't take it all at once. We can't serve that, but we need to start taking this in bite-sized pieces. But the process has to be reasonable.
Yeah, no, I'm not debating that, Rob. It was more a question. They came a couple of years ago, and
they did. Nick and I went to them, and we hammered out a map.
Right.
But then the process got too onerous.
Right.
And then we needed to both agencies needed to work on their comprehensive plan, and an annexation would mess up the work we're doing right now on comprehensive plans. So
And that wasn't my question. My question was really, have they come back with us with any more? And
Yeah.
doesn't sound like the answer is no. Okay, good.
not till next year. So here's the
Okay.
map.
And
Right.
I did talk to Eric Baker about this and said as soon as we complete our comp plans, I would like to resume this discussion. But just as a refresher, and for Eric who didn't see this previously, the areas in purple are what we were proposing to annex. And so originally we also had some areas on Mile Hill, but we removed those later in the process because it was too controversial. But Bethel South is something that we would really like to bring in, zone commercial, and see kind of the extension of our Bethel project into that area. There's a little island on Glenwood. There's an island on Sydney that we're actually going to be building a sewer line through this, but we have to get permits from the county because we don't control the right of way for 150 feet. One property up here on the industrial park. And then we actually have 5 customers. All these people are on city utilities, but they have to pay 150% of our rates because they're outside of the city. And it made sense to bring them in because we only have 9 total utility customers that aren't in the city limits currently. And these were those folks.
So good question, Jay, but it got tabled and we hope to bring this back next year.
Yep, and I'm good with that. So I just wanted to see if there was anything in the comp plan about it. So we're good. Anything else for the good of the order? It's been certainly a meeting with a lot of topics. Anything, Eric?
No, good first meeting. I like it.
All right, Mayor, Jim, and Nick,
Nope. Everyone have a good
All
night.
right. For the good of the order. Thank you.
Thank you.